Leaf Erikson. О, то есть это как они нашли это, как они вернут это так. Правильно? Это как?
Сержант над стоит правда, 1500. Ну, сама карта такая старая. Карта сделана, вот эта карта сделана. Я в Калифорнии. Нет, наш Вашингтон. Конечно,
Зато только Индианс были.
а Индиансы, они были прям до Тихого океана, они где-то заканчивали.
Какого Индианс? А может, не тихонечко? Не надо.
These features make the magazine bomb-proof, protecting the up to 50 tons of gunpowder that could be stored here against a direct hit from an explosive artillery shell. Other features, like the nail-free assembly of the wooden floors and wall coverings, and the use of gunpowder storage barrels rather than hoops of grass, copper, or willow, help to minimize the chance of a spark.
Кстати, он тут другой берег, да, он просто... Да, он должен быть там, я просто ничего не... Сейчас сойду.
Отсюда они вы. Да, вот тут 4 можно шара. Или может они сюда.
within my vocal range at this point, so I will go ahead and get started. First and foremost, welcome to Old Fort Niagara, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming out on this beautiful October day. What you are looking at, the uniform I am wearing, is the uniform of the 1st United States Regiment of Artillerists. They're one of the primary American units stationed here at Old Fort Niagara during the War of 1812. It is folks of the 1st United States Artillery who are responsible for the bombardment with Fort George across the river in the autumn of 1812, and they are also present during the night attack, December 19th, 1813, when the fort is retaken by the British in about half an hour's time. All of that history is lovely, fascinating, and I can literally talk about it all day because it is my job to do so. But what I'm here to talk to you all about is this lovely piece of American military hardware in my hands. This is a model 1795 Springfield flintlock musket. So, does anyone know what just came out of my mouth and what I mean when I say flintlock or musket? Anyone at all?
It's got a flint striker.
Alright, so we'll start with the flintlock part, the easier part, well, the more important part, let's put it that way. This part right here in the middle of the gun is called the lock of the gun, as opposed to the stock and the barrel. This is going to rely on good old flint and steel to hopefully produce a spark, which is going to set up a whole chain reaction, ending in a boom out of the gun. So, this back part right here, which looks like a dog's head or a rooster's head, has a piece of flint in between its jaws, so to speak. When I pull the trigger, that rear assembly is going to come flying forward. That piece of flint is going to come in contact with this forward part called the hammer or the frizzen, made out of steel. So, hopefully, that will produce a spark. Hopefully, number one. Hopefully, that spark is going to fall and land into the pan of the gun. Well, I'm going to place a small charge of black powder in just a second. Hopefully, that detonates. Hopefully, that will send a jet of flame through the vent hole of the gun. That small hole drilled right next to the pan, straight into the bottom of the bore, where there's going to be an even larger powder charge awaiting it. Hopefully, that will send a 67 caliber round lead musket ball rattling down the barrel downrange to its maximum and making sure that everything's nice in its tidy place, hopefully keeping it protected. The guns then come about. The rest of this package, the paper, the powder, and the projectile are all going to go down the end of the barrel. And the paper here is actually rather important, not just to keep the economy of motion going, keep the steps flowing, but also to act as wadding within the gun. Because not only is this a smooth-bore piece, it is also firing an intentionally undersized projectile. So you might have picked up me saying that the projectile itself is a 67 caliber round lead musket ball. The barrel is 69 caliber. There is a little bit of a gap. That's going to help the reload. But in the same way that's helping the reload speed, by essentially falling straight on down to the bottom, suppose I'm standing on the walls of a lovely fort, and I point my gun downward. It's going to roll right on back out. So the paper is important to act as wadding. Next, I'm going to draw my ramrod. Ramrod is an old military term for very big stick. That's all it means. It's going to act exactly as a big stick to push the rest of that charge right on home down to the bottom. Make sure everything's nice in its proper spot. With the powder charge touching up against the vent hole, the 67 caliber round lead projectile on top of that, and the paper crimped and wrapped around that. Now for the most important step. No, it is not pulling the trigger. It is removing this from the barrel. Keep in mind, if you are firing this once, you're most likely going to have to fire it again. Do not shoot your only means of reloading downrange. You might get a couple high fives, you might look cool for a second, but you're going to have to reload. This is your only way to do so. Do yourself a favor and put that back. So, after all those quick and easy 12 steps, the gun's now ready to be fired. I'm going to point this in a safe direction and count down from 3. Right about now. If anyone does not like loud noises, please take some action on that, and do not say I did not warn you. So, 3, 2, 1. Right, so a couple observations, folks. Yes, there's a lot of confetti. You're welcome. But there's also a lot of smoke out of this gun. And keep in mind, it's very important to talk about how these guns are going to be utilized on the battlefield tactically. We're going to be employing what's called linear tactics, or linear warfare. It's in the name. Myself and 99 of my best friends, we're all going to line up in a perfectly long straight line, 50 long and 2 deep. We're all going to point our guns at the same thing. we're all going to pull the trigger at the same time. It might sound dumb today, because in the context of 2021, yes, do not do this on a battlefield. But in the 18th and early 19th century, given the technology that is available to militaries, given the fact that these are smoothbore pieces, which are not that accurate at greater distances, given the fact that every single shot requires 15 seconds of reload time, and the chances for some kind of malfunction where the gun doesn't actually go off, it's best to shoot these with friends. That way, every 15 seconds, you have a literal wall of lead coming down at your opponents, who are also conveniently standing in nice long straight lines. It's a very long way of saying, take the one musket shot that you just saw, all of that smoke, multiply it by at least 100 for the company, if not the hundreds or thousands of small arms which are going to be on either side of a battlefield. Then, take into account the actual artillery, like the gun in the middle of the fort, which is also going to produce a tremendous amount of smoke every 30 seconds for those pieces. It's going to be very, very, very difficult to see on a battlefield in this time period. So uniforms are not going to be subdued colors, they're not going to be camouflage. Because for one primary motivation, friendly fire, it's going to produce a tremendous amount of smoke, very hard to see. If you cannot see who you are shooting at, good chance that they might be your friends. So, uniforms, as a general rule, are going to be both bright and distinctive articles of clothing. Bright so you can see through all that smoke, see through the fog of war, and distinctive so you can look at a soldier once and know all the vital information that you need to know about them. So going from top to bottom real quick, this very tall, impeccable, rather silly hat I am wearing. It's called a shako. It's made out of wool felt. Later ones are made out of nice, lightweight leather. The idea behind this, militarily speaking, is to make all of your soldiers appear a foot taller. There's one major problem with this. If everyone is wearing hats that make them look a foot taller, and every military in the early 19th century is, no one looks a foot taller. It's a very tall hat that likes to be blown away in the wind. On that, a big white plume, again to add a little bit of extra height, but can also have different colors depending on your function in the army. Your standard infantrymen and artillerymen are going to have all white plumes. The yellow cord on my shako is distinguishing me as an artillerist in the United States Army. Moving down this nice, comfortable leather neck stock around my neck. No, this is not for my own pleasure. This is to keep my head up, especially for the Army and for working class folks. So that's a couple of notes about the uniform. I'm going to wrap things up on my left hip and draw what many of you are going to recognize as a bayonet. However, this is not like a modern bayonet today. If you take a look down the blade, you can also notice a rather peculiar shape to it by today's standards. This is called a triangular socket bayonet. So the socket part is very simple. It refers to the fact that I can fit a bayonet over the end of my musket and turn my musket into a 7-foot-long spear, which is a very effective social distancing tool. But notice how the blade is offset from the end of the barrel, which means I can proceed to load and fire my piece with the bayonet fixed, a very common tactic, which means when this is going to be used for its intended purpose, there's going to be a nice fine layer of black powder residue coating this surface right here. Your body is not going to enjoy that inside of it. But let's tackle the shape. It's a triangle or the shape itself. 18th and 19th century steel is not as superior a quality as steel is today. It tends to bend a lot easier.
part for. So the Indians would come to the fort, they would trade here. So the hatchets, they would trade for beads.
They appeared in the early 1750s. The Commandant was usually a captain in La Compagnie Franche de la Marine, the French colonial infantry. He was responsible for defending the fort against attack, negotiating with Native Americans, supervising the fur trade, and maintaining the condition of the fortress and its garrison. At Niagara, he also had to oversee the condition of the portage road around Niagara Falls. Officers were usually drawn from the Canadian gentry and often followed their fathers into the military. There was a wide social gulf between the officer and the enlisted man, as reflected in the items displayed in this room. Not only did the officer have private space, even at remote wilderness outposts, he had the ability to bring along personal furnishings and other possessions like books, silver, and china. In this way, he could maintain himself as a gentleman. The Commandant reported directly to the Governor-General of New France, sending frequent correspondence about the needs of the fort and developments in the surrounding region. The room where you are standing is the Commandant's bedroom. The adjacent room to the east is the officer's dining room, and the small room to the west was used for storage and as an office for the Commandant. As you tour the French castle, look for differences between the officers' and enlisted men's quarters and possessions. The French soldiers who lived here in the early 1750s were part of the independent companies of the Navy, les Compagnies Franches de la Marine, in the Niagara region, including the highly competitive fur trade. Most recruits for the independent companies came from France, where they signed a contract for a minimum 6-year enlistment. Soldiers were supposed to be at least 16 years old, but many recruiters bent the rules to accept younger men. Most recruits joined to gain employment. A few sought to escape the law. Service at a frontier fort in New France could be brutal and boring. Much of the soldiers' daily routine consisted of guard duty, making repairs to the fort, or escorting supplies up and down the river. Here in the guard room, the soldiers were assigned guard duty lasting 24 consecutive hours. During this time, they would serve as sentries for 2-hour periods. While not on sentry duty, the soldiers remained at the ready in the guard room. Here they could sleep in their uniforms or prepare their ration of peas and pork in the fireplace.